start with public participation. The board welcomes public participation and asks that speakers please limit their comments to 2 minutes. Speakers may offer objective comments of school operations and programs that concern them. The board will not permit any expression of personal complaints or defamatory comments about Board of Education personnel and students, or against any person connected with the Danbury Public School System. Anyone in the first row wish to address the board this evening? Second row? Third row? Mrs. Tyson.
I'm Sandy Steichen, back to talk to you again. I'd like to talk to you about the integrity of Danbury High School because it's fallen to an all-time low, and there's a crisis in the confidence of the high school. There's been articles in the paper, articles on the web. Students are talking about this grading situation. It's not gone away. It's still there. It's still very much alive. I don't know if you want me to quote things that have been in the newspaper. You're going to talk about it later in your session because it is on the agenda. But a lot of contradictory things going on. The principal says one thing in one article and contradicts it in another article. I don't know how much latitude I have to express what was said.
Complaints against specific personnel.
Right, it's not against him, it's against what was actually said. Are grades counted? Are they not graded? Are grades subjective? Or are they not subjective? How could you say that to children? I don't know. So I'm hoping that, you'll be able to answer a lot of these questions. Also, recently we found out that by the time the school year 2011 and 12 begins, not math, but science is going to be cut another 30%. 30%. So I just am appealing to the board to try and get some answers to these questions. We need tremendous improvement. We need transparency. We need information. We need consistency. As parents, we're concerned. We're concerned about our kids' education and the integrity of Danbury High School. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tyson. Presentation this evening is Superintendent Goal Update Achievement Gap, Dr. Pescarolo.
As a follow-up to last week's, 2 weeks ago's data presentation, there have been some questions about the gaps. Tonight, we're going to discuss, Phil will be discussing part of that. Are you going to use this, or are you going to?
No, because the board has, had the benefit of the workshop, and the question as we understood it, the issue as we understood it, there was not ample time for questions. There was some time, but not enough. So we'd be more than happy to try and entertain any questions that you may have. See if we can be a little bit more specific on detailed items if there are any.
Okay, the item that I'm most concerned with, I looked at the statistics and all, and it seems that we sort of been either holding steady at the grades on these tests, within maybe a 3% increase or what have you. But the thing that caught my eye, it seemed that we're making no progress at all on closing the achievement gaps, which is obviously one of the goals that I think the board and everybody's been trying to do. So it's just like an update. Am I reading this correctly? And just, what can we do about it if I'm right?
Well,
Am I reading?
You are reading correctly. Just give me 1 second. In terms of the data sets that are there, the problem that we're experiencing, listening to our principals, and I can print out a copy of the document that I have here, we have closed the gap over time in many of the subgroup populations. And if you look at each year discretely and then you look over the trend data for X number of years, we can bring out, if you remember, Mrs. Lindenmeyer showed that we have made substantial progress in closing the gap in many identified areas. The problem that we have, the concern that we want to raise to the board level tonight, and we did a little bit of it last time, is that the progress that we've made over time, and the board will remember that we had scored at the top of our district reference group, which is a very nice accomplishment. We've been recognized for that. But our concern is that we're starting to go in the wrong direction. And that's the real issue that we're looking at. The information that we shared with the board, we lost 4% of our teaching force through reductions, 12% of our paraprofessionals, 14% of our administrators, and 20% of our cabinet level positions, really is a daunting challenge, because we're at a time when we should be increasing support, we're actually cutting back. I'd like to remind the board that we started with 38 reading and math specialists in 2008 for a little bit under 5,000 students, and now we're down to 19.5 for almost 5,200 students. So we've taken a dramatic cut in the very faculty members that actually are working diligently to close those gaps. We lost, in just a few years, 17 literacy specialists at the classroom level in each, totally in the elementary schools. So that made such a major impact on our ability to provide discrete instruction to kids. Again, it's a big issue that the principals have been raising nonstop. The board may remember that graphic that has all the faces and suddenly all the empty, the profiles of where people were and no longer there. Another point that we like to raise, we're going to be doing this again tomorrow with the Administrative Council, is that our student mobility rate is almost 40%. It's hovering at 39%. So what that means is, if I can round it up to 40% just for conversation, when we start September 1, by the time we finish June 30th, 40% of those youngsters are different. They come and go from the Danbury school to the Danbury schools. They come and go from the city of Danbury to other towns and cities. They leave school A, go to school B, and come back to school A. And then we also have that reoccurring problem where culturally some families take as many as 6 weeks off to go go to different parts of the world because it's family time in a sense. So we're fighting each one of these issues, but the really pernicious part of this is we have a 40% revolving door of kids. So just as you start to get traction, those kids are going and a new set of kids come in. And as recently as last week, when I was meeting with a number of our elementary principals, one of our principals pulled up a sheet and said, this is how many kids were with us at Christmas time, and this is how many have changed. There are all these red lines all the way down the class lists. It's a very, very daunting problem. Compounding that is that, and I probably do need to print this out for you, so you can see this. When we started in 2002-2004 year bracket for No Child Left Behind, our CMT reading requirement was 57%. We had to have 57% of our kids score at the proficient level of reading. This year it's 89%. We haven't changed anything to mitigate that huge jump. And instead, we've actually gone back by cutting 17 reading specialists. And the mobility rate has increased, and compounding this, the board members during our budget deliberations, our poverty rate went from the low to mid-30s up to 46% this year. So our kids are coming in poor. There are principals, if you recall, are reporting out that the kids have the least amount of background experiences in kindergarten that they have ever seen during their entire careers. The achievement gap that starts, and this really pinpoints your question, Mr. Chapersak. We've talked about this many times, but it bears repeating constantly. Research indicates, and recently the commissioner talked about this again, kids from low-income families come to kindergarten with 3,000-word vocabularies, moderate income with 5,000-word vocabularies, high income with 7,000 to 10,000-word vocabularies. The first day of the first year of a child's academic career, there's a huge achievement gap. So you take that increasing gap that's coming in because of poverty, you look at the mobility rate, you look at the fact that we've cut 17 literacy people and numeracy people as well, even more so combined, over the course of those years, and that the AYP numbers have gone up, it becomes a staggering initiative to try and get your arms around it. That's why the principals are really struggling with this one more than ever before. With all that as a backdrop, I think that's why we've been recognized for our work in closing the achievement gap over time, because it goes contrary to common sense. We shouldn't be doing as well as we're doing. And the fear that we have, and kind of tongue-in-cheek, Dr. Pasquarello and I tease each other about this. We've been talking about possibility for the first time in a long time that we're going to actually slide back with our achievement levels. And the reason being is because of these devastating financial times we're in, we're cutting the roots of the tree in a sense and expecting it to remain standing. It's not going to happen. I will be thrilled this year if we maintain status quo and go on record saying I'm stupefied if our scores go up. Between the devastating cuts that we've had in personnel, increase in poverty, increase in mobility, and one of the worst winters that we can recall in terms of non-interrupted instructional time. I'll show you this quick graphic. You have it a different way, I think, but this is the month of January, and everything that has yellow or red around it indicates a disruption in instruction. That's how much of a Swiss cheese our instructional program was this past month. And it's leading into the CMTs that we're taking in a couple of weeks. So your points are extremely well taken. These are the issues that we've put in front of the board before in terms of talking about our overarching goal is to continuously work to close all achievement gaps. Not only with kids of color, not only linguistically challenged kids, not only kids who live in poverty, but also the challenges that come with, I'm a relatively high achieving child, but I can do better. So there's a gap there as well. So what we've tried to do in many different ways with the board is to give you all kinds of data sets that will show you the different gaps that we have, and over time, the success rate that we've had in closing it. But with all that said completely, if our performance was this a number of years ago and it's now here, which it is, what's happened though is it's gone like this, and the gap has stayed the same. So the lowest achieving kids have scored higher than ever, the subgroups have scored higher than ever, but the other kids who were relatively high achieving to begin with are scoring higher than ever. So our gap continues, although overall our performance has increased. This may be the first year where we start to see a decline, and we're doing everything we possibly can to ensure that that doesn't happen. And lastly, we put in a disproportionate number of interventions this year, more than we ever have on a school-by-school basis. They're idiosyncratic interventions, so no two are alike. We're running after-school support sessions in School A. We're running grade-level meetings in School B. We're running data team meetings in School C. We're running sessions, special morning tutoring, smart groups we're calling them. We're putting different kinds of materials into different schools, all based on what the leadership team in each building has told us is the most pressing need. And we've been able to drive that, fortunately, through the accountability grant for literacy. So if those things prove to be as successful as everybody's hoping, then we will continue to do what we've been doing for a number of years now, and that's that upward trend in performance. But it'd be irresponsible for me to say to the board that the playing field has stayed the same over the past few years. It hasn't, as we've been saying, we're now cutting into our core mission. We have cut into our core mission. We have cut into those literacy specialists, for example, the literacy specialists seriously hurt us. And we've tried to find new ways, new interventions to mitigate against those. But you can only keep cutting staff so long before you finally get to the point where you're just not providing ample resources.
Mr. Chairman.
I think much to the credit of all of the personnel teachers in Danbury, which I think are the best, I think we're going to see in the coming years the effect of the last couple of years of the cuts we've had. We've cut in dollars, I keep saying it's approximately $10 million, the 50 or 60 people that were terminated, literacy people, the kindergarten aides. This has to have some sort of an effect starting at a particular point in mushrooming. I find it difficult to think that we are going to make any progress, I think, in the future. We're also thinking in terms of the effect of class sizes. I look at I use the word burnout, but we're asking our teachers to do more with less. So there's a physical stress, a mental stress on them. I mean, we're at a point where we haven't got our budget yet this year from the city, so what we're going to do? Say, right, we are cutting the routes, and yet, here we are saying, gee, how can we improve and how can we improve? It seems to me that we're not doing anything to give you the funds, or nobody's giving us the funds so that we could make the improvements. Everything we're doing is basically out of the best efforts of the individuals here But I tend to think in the next couple of years, we will see these grades and the effects go down for the reasons in the areas that we cut in. And I wouldn't be surprised.
I have to say that clearly I agree with you. It's amazing to me, and it really is a testament to the quality of the instructional staff that we have at the building level. You know, I'm in schools daily and multiple classrooms daily, and teachers are doing a bang-up job. The administrators, they will ask me to come in their office to close the door, and they kind of put their head down and say, I don't know if I can handle it one more day, Bill. But the door will open, and they're out there, and they're come on, rah, troops, let's go. So it really does border on amazement in terms of looking at the Herculean effort that's taking place. This is going to sound terrible, but let me see if I can make sense out of this. I went to a vineyard, and all the grapevines were these little distorted looking things, and talked to the people who ran the vineyard, and they said the grapevines do much better when they're under stress. And so they cut them back dramatically, and that increased stress forces the grapes to do more than theoretically they should, I guess. In a very strange way, it's what's happening with us. This increased burden where the teacher said, are you telling me I no longer have a kindergarten aide? That's correct. Instead of 2 with 20, it's now 1 with 22. Okay? And they figure out how to make the best of it. Are you telling me I no longer have a literacy leader to come in and work with me on the literacy skills? That's correct. The person's been eliminated. Are you telling me that my resource materials, my textbook, my classroom libraries, for example, are not going to increase? That's correct. We're going to have to figure that out. And as we keep adding all these additional burdens onto the instructional staff, it's amazing that they have rallied and they're really holding their own, and the leadership at the building level. And today I met for 3 hours with district administrators, and they're feeling the same kind of excruciating pain in many cases, but they're getting tough. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So we are probably the best we've ever been instructionally in this school system because of this added stress. It does, though, beg the question, we just can't, with that straw that broke the camel's back, we just can't keep asking people to assume more and more and more without expecting at some point in time you're going to get diminishing returns.
I defer to anybody else. I have a lot of questions, but
I'm going to reserve till after everyone's finished. Mr. Townsend.
okay. The committee on the state, that came out of TDEC, after seeing how this has been going, looking at all the statistics and all, what has been their reaction? I'm just trying to see what the playing field looks like in the future.
They've come down and met with us, and tomorrow we have TDEC, the full TDEC committee meeting, representing the entire district. And the state has indicated that they're going to come in and actually ask us to do less, pare back the work that we've undertaken through our district enhancement plan, because it's just so much that they're saying, given everything that you've been trying to do, it's very admirable, but you're going to have to, we're encouraging you to scale back your work. And so today we spent 3 hours paring it down. We're more than happy to give the board a few minutes. I'll give you a copy of the work that we did today that we'll be sharing with the administrative council tomorrow on the TDEC in the afternoon.
Okay, since I was, involved with TDEC, would you mind if I join in? I think it's an afternoon meeting.
We would appreciate it.
Okay, what time would it be? I think it's down here.
2 o'clock.
All right,
That'd be wonderful.
Then I'm not going to ask any more questions. I have a feeling a lot of them will be answered there.
Any other questions? Mrs. Molnar?
I just have a question on the mobility. And because of the workshop, we did see one school in particular had very low mobility rate going on in their school, and yet they are the lowest performing. So it didn't correlate. So I'm assuming that there are best practices going on, and I agree that we should pare back what has been going on and maybe get back to basics first and then start over again. I don't know about the mobility rate. I don't know if that holds true.
I can speak to that. I would say, based on my experience doing this for quite some time, that yes, the mobility rate is a challenging factor, but it's not the only thing. There are schools that have high, I'll give you the best example, very high mobility rates that they do very well.
And they do very well.
Norfolk, Virginia. Their mobility rate, and this is staggering, is 90%. The reason being, it's a naval base, so the kids are moving through constantly. But the other issues that would be plaguing them have not because of the structures they put into place. So mobility is a challenge unless you find a way of mitigating against it. Poverty is a challenge based on the research, but we have kids today who live in at or below the poverty level who do extremely well because they put, structures in place to mitigate. We have kids who come in and don't speak a word of English who graduate toward the top of the class. So just by having like a strike against you or 2 or 3 or 4 doesn't mean we can't do anything about it. We certainly can. The issue you're talking about, Mrs. Molinaro, is, in my opinion, different. There are fundamental challenges, instructional challenges in that school, and we shared with the board 2 things. One, they're going to have to undergo the Governance Council legislation because of the previous year's performance. And secondly, we have brought in a specially trained team, Danbury Central Office Administrators, with an instrument that was created based on that school's outcome achievement plan in conjunction with the principal. We vetted this out for a couple of months, maybe 3 months, until we eventually went in and used it. And what was revealed after visiting every single classroom teacher in that building and spending time observing, anywhere from say 30 minutes to 40 minutes. It varied from team to team. We had 2 people for the most part go in for this concept of integrated reliability. What did you see? What did you see? And they compare notes. And we found that there are some fundamental instructional deficits that are so substantial that they'll require some long-term interventions. Similar to another school that we did something like this with, and the good news with that school, as you recall, became the most improved elementary school in Fairfield County and won that Long Pine Award. But it was a Herculean undertaking, and that staff really pulled itself up by the bootstraps, and we provided a lot of central office support to that. We see the same dynamic at play here. We don't think that school is not, is in a position where we can't salvage it. We absolutely do. I think we have some strong educators there. We have some strong instructional problems as well. And so the mobility rate, in the absence of that, it doesn't mean that all these instructional problems have gone. And so we really have a lot of work to do there.
Thank you.
Mr. Gianni.
Bill, the data that is collected by measuring the statistics in here seems to have a lot of variables, and the kids aren't even the same from year to year. And it's just so complex. What do you arrive at as a conclusion from putting all this together? I mean, on a day-to-day teaching basis, I would think that the teacher in a classroom and a school and the district is more concerned about the progress the student has made from the day they entered in September to when they exit in June. But what assessments do you get from these tests, which is so highly publicized, and it comes out and then it just makes, makes for news, and I think it's blown out of proportion. Is there really a value in these particular tests and scores?
The short answer is yes, and I do understand how they become relatively high stakes and they play one district off of another. I mean, in a friendly, collegial way, we have kind of a bantering relationship with some of our sister school systems. We call them and say, by the way, we outscored you again, kind of thing. But we all realize that that's just the tip of the iceberg. And this is, it's kind of a fun thing to say, but the real work has nothing to do with comparing District A with District B, Classroom A with Classroom B. What we really use this information to do is to inform our planning, inform our delivery, and inform our assessment strategies. So if we find in School A, if all 3 classrooms at the 2nd grade, 4th grade level are the same, they don't have a preponderance of one type of challenge youngster versus another. They're just pretty much heterogeneously divided, which is what we promote. And we find that one teacher over the course of 5 years consistently outscores the other teachers. We want to know why and what we can do to export those specific discrete strategies to the other classrooms and beyond that to throughout the district. The second thing is that we do these things called common formative assessments, meaning we use the same assessment across the district at a grade level at the same time of year so that we can collect common data, and that says, so how are we doing? The third piece is that, this goes back to Mr. Taversack's point, and it's really challenging. Again, I cannot tell you how much faith and confidence and respect I have for our teachers, because daily they're doing the impossible because we've asked them to. What we've said is, if you give us 10 months of growth for 10 months of instruction, September to June, 10 months of growth for 10 months of instruction, that's what you get paid to do. That's a reasonable statement. We're asking you to give us 12 months of growth for 10 months of instruction, 15 months of growth for 10 months of instruction with many of these youngsters, because if you don't, that achievement gap stays the same. All kids go up, but the gap doesn't close. So you'll see teachers doing these inordinate things, coming early, staying late, buying their own materials, really doing a bang-up job communicating with parents. So the third part then is looking to see if we're getting more than 10 months of growth for 10 months of instruction. The last thing really comes back, this is what Nero said before getting back to basics. This was our conversation today. We have three big things that we're going to be focusing on with great fidelity. The first is, it sounds so simplistic, but if you think about it, it's really the bread and butter of what we do. Number one, get more kids to come to school regularly. And embedded in that is not only they come on time, and they stay the full day. And I think the board is aware that one of our schools in the lobby posted bar graphs that said, this is how many kids were absent today, this month versus last month versus the month before. This is how many kids came tardy. This is how many kids were pulled out early. And we had parents, and in no way am I faulting parents, but this is a problem behavior, saying I have to pick up my child 30 minutes before school because I have to get him to soccer practice. And I won't make it if I don't pick him up early. For us, that's grossly unacceptable, and we're kind of going toe-to-toe with some parents. When the principal put those bar charts, bar graphs up, my phone started ringing off the hook, but I supported that intervention because we needed to get that word out. You need to get the kids to school and keep them here. The second big thing is we need a guaranteed viable curriculum for every child. The books in the back, the books over down the bottom that we recently moved to the other side. We created 17 new curriculum guides at the secondary level last year, 11 at the middle school level this year, and another 17 at the secondary level for honors this year. That is literally unheard of in the state of Connecticut. But it was because we were so far behind because of those devastating budget cuts that the years we went through back in 2002, for example. So the second big thing is make sure that you have a viable curriculum that teachers have in their hands. And the third piece gets into the issue that we talked about a moment ago, and that is make sure that every teacher is at the top of his or her game. Make sure that the administrator is doing the same thing, that they're at the top of their game. The whole accountability factor plays into account. And so how do we know we're doing better? That's when we take the formative assessment data and we meet. In some cases, the principals are meeting weekly with teams of teachers, sitting there saying, kid by kid basis. All right, last month this kid did this month. When I say weekly, I mean grade 1 on grade 3 on the first week of the month, grade 4 on the second week of the month, grade 5 on the third week of the month. So once a month, the principal's meeting with every teacher at all grade levels with a roster of children and this running data set on each kid, saying, let's look at the lost links on my legal assessment, let's look at the running records, the literacy, let's look at blue ribbon in math, at the middle school level, let's look at the elementary, let's look at the common math assessments that we do, the pre-posts, that the math team is. All these assessment data sets are sitting right in front of the principals and teachers. And so they have real live data, mostly electronically, and they're sitting there saying, so what did we learn from this? By the time the CMTs come, this is the last point on this, I don't need to belabor it, but and it's going to sound horrible, we tell our principals, don't worry about the CMTs. Don't worry about those tests at all. Just teach the curriculum with fidelity, using best practice, and that stuff will take care of itself. And we found that to be proven true, because if you look at our data sets, just remember that chart we did with the Common Council. Every grade level tested, Every content area tested, moving up. That's capacity building at work and the systemic transformation that's occurring. With all that said, it comes right back to the beginning, and I'll print this out in a minute and share it with the board and folks in the audience. If we're not careful, we're going to cut off too many roots on that tree and it's going to start to die.
Just want to see me on that. Just want to, the points I want to make on this, again, I apologize for missing part of the workshop last time, but taking this up 2 or 3 levels, understanding all of the hard work and the effort that's going on everyone in the district to make sure we can do as much as we can, given the resources that we have. The big picture is still the targets that are on the page are not going to change, at least anytime soon. So we're still on the hook regardless if we have 1, 5, or 20 limitations to reach the targets that are on the page. And so what I think I'm hearing is that the likelihood of achieving this, whether it's this year, next year, 3 years from now, is not very likely to happen. Again, not for lack of effort for people being above and beyond the call of duty, but whatever those situational factors are, getting to 100%, 2.5 years from now, doesn't sound to me like a realistic possibility based on what I've heard, and you can tell me if that's incorrect.
Well, 100% proficiency rate that was established 7 years ago was proven to be statistically inaccurate to happen anyway. I think that aside from that, the answer to that is no. But I think you need to spend the time in the schools, even though the bar is moving up. I mean, failure is an option, we all say that. But in fact, there are things going on that are out of our control. So no, I don't see the kids getting up to 100%. My concern, Bill knows, is that we have to, whatever it is we say we're going to do, we should be doing. That fidelity of implementation is important. And the teachers expect that. We expect that. And that's one of the things that we're trying to be very careful of. That's one. The other thing is finding ways to extend their time and seeing if that impacts the students successfully. And then focus those students that are with us. Maybe don't have mobility kids, going in and out. How about if we have a lot more brighter kids coming in, and not brighter, but kids more capable than leaving? I mean, it goes both ways sometimes as well. But what about the kids that are with us for 5 years? I mean, on the Lost Links, we know we disaggregated those youngsters. They do succeed as head of the state level in terms of the bilingual kids. We need to know our other kids. So I think we'll find successes, but I don't think we're going to achieve, if that's 100%.
I understand that. But
that's not going to happen.
But we're still, understanding all of that, we still have to answer to the state.
Yes.
We have to answer to all of our parents, the public, everyone, and then to ourselves. And so how do we, address that, given we have numbers that are, for various reasons, in my mind, not attainable? How do we reconcile that with who we have to answer to?
I think first of all, it's a great question. As a matter of fact, this is the kind of prime directive for us, is the one we struggle with the most. I think we answer it as honestly and as transparently as possible, and we focus on the concept of growth. And if you look, as Sal mentioned a minute ago, if you look at our English language learners, that population is considered to be one of the most challenging to move ahead. If you look at our district reference group, I believe there was a slide in it that we had. No, I didn't get it for the board. If you look at the Stanfords and the Norwalks, all the cities that are like us, our district reference group, we not only scored at the top of the chart, we outscored every school system in our group dramatically, so we were right off the table. We had to create a new part of the table just to show where Danbury goes. The second thing is, Sal mentioned this too, and we just hit on it gingerly, and maybe we should have spent more time. If you look at the kids who are with us from beginning to the end, there's a dramatic difference. The kids who are with us score much higher than the kids who transferred in. And lastly, and this is the part that's just, this is not necessarily an educational term, but it's crazy. It's the only term I can think of. And as Sal said, it was statistically proven to be impossible to attain the NCLB benchmarks by 2013-14. Here's what it says. For every child in every subgroup, you will hit 100% proficiency. That means, and Joyce was here in charge of special services, and I feel comfortable speaking this way because one of my 2 children was a special needs youngster who had special accommodations. This law says we ignored that, and we're now saying you're going to have 100% proficiency with your special ed population. yet at the same time they have IDEA that says you have to make sure that you do the right thing. It ignores the fact that the research on English language learners says 3 years to learn conversational, 7 to 9 years to learn instructional. So we're not going to give you that much time, and you're going to have to score 100% proficiency. Kids who come in poverty, who have never had these background experiences, schema as we call it, it's irrelevant. You're going to have to close that gap and get 100% proficiency. So all kids will now be considered the same, they will all score at the same level. It sounds wonderful, but it's been proven repeatedly that's fantasy. So we look at it and say, okay, don't get bogged down in NCOB and all that stuff, because you could be bogged down forever. Instead, look at where our kids are and have they grown at least 10 months of growth to 10 months of instruction, and preferably 11 months, 12 months, 13 months, etc. And as we've shown you repeatedly through the data sets, we have been doing that, outscoring the districts like us. You saw a number of those slides, we've outscored the state average, which we shouldn't be doing theoretically, but we do. What's that saying? Aerodynamically speaking, bumblebees can't fly. Their bodies are too big and the wings are too small. God never told them, so they fly anyway. That's pretty much our model here. We're going to make it happen for kids, and we do. And the real work that we have here, I think, is twofold. And I apologize if it sounds like I'm a soapbox here, but it's such critical stuff. Two things. Number one is to make sure that we fight every chance we can to provide the resources needed at the classroom level. And number two, and this becomes more of a Sal and Bill and Elio and Kim and Joyce, we have to keep our folks from buckling because the pressure they're under is enormous. And as those numbers go up, and we're at, let me just read you the numbers right now. 89%, 91, 91, and 90. That's what they expect special ed kids, ELL kids, sport kids, all those kids, all other kids to score it this year. 90% of your kids will be proficient. And then by 2013, 100% will be, no exceptions. And our guys kind of go, and we say, put your hands back down, it's okay. You're doing the right thing. Keep doing what you've been doing. Let's keep getting smarter with our work. And if you don't believe in this, look at the results of your labors and see how much you've moved children forward. So ultimately, if you can factor out the stress, this has been good for the Danbury Public Schools. We're capturing more kids and having more kids realize success. The cost, obviously, is the adult population, and we're really struggling with that.
I think part of it, an answer to Herb's question is to how do we communicate or answer to let's say, the general public with regard to these scores, is by a better understanding or informative, just like we've had, to the public and to us board members and to everybody else, as to what these scores mean. I mean, how they're made up, how difficult they are, how many variables that go into here. In addition to that, to continue to do what we've been doing to measure it on a growth basis. So again, they can see the validity of both test scores and come to their own conclusion. It's not that we have to justify anything. I think it's more of an educational understanding as for us, me personally, is to know what goes into making up these numbers so I can evaluate them and discount it and pay more attention to something else.
Arnie Duncan was supposed to look at a value-added assessment piece. That's still in the conversation, that is still going on, but that has not come to fruition. When they have the reauthorization of NCLB, or ESEA they call it now, I would expect there'll be a change to look at growth value. This is not just affecting Danbury, it's something nationally. So to look at those interventions, have they been productive, and then look at the growth over time rather than different students at different times, and which does not make a lot of sense. But that has not happened yet. That's what we're waiting for. That will then, I think it'll solidify the work and also show how hard people are working when there's fidelity of implementation, they're making sound decisions, sound practices, then we should start seeing some growth. But that's not the way they're measuring us right now.
Again, this to me is a snapshot.
Well, that's
Snapshot of a point in time, and bingo, and it's a still picture of a point in time, and a growth assessment to me would have more meaning and more of a validity as to how we're doing.
it's a terrible way to characterize it, but it's a well-known way. It comes from Dr. Douglas Reeves, the Center for Leadership Learning in Massachusetts. He calls tests like the CAP and CMT autopsy data. And he doesn't mean to dismiss it. What he says is, you give it in March, and you wait through your end of March, April, May, June, July, and then you get the data sets. Those kids are gone. And so it tells you whether the patient is healthy or the patient passed away and why. But what do you do with that? So we went with these formative assessments that were given very frequently. So teachers have real-time data sets in their hands to make instructional decisions as opposed to waiting for that one-day snapshot in time for a given assessment.
And the last thing I'll say is, we touched on it before, but we can't underestimate, a lot of times we gloss over this. You know, what you do, what all of you and the professionals do during the day is only 1/3 of what the kids experience. And if they don't have the support, the other 2/3 of the time they're not in school, you can have the best program on the planet, you're not going to reach all the kids for a significant portion of it. And we can't legislate what happens outside the school. But, you know, we don't really factor that into it. We can factor things like poverty, so kids don't eat healthy, et cetera, or the parents that work 2 jobs and they can't be home with them, but that's indirectly that shows. But we really don't take into account where, you know, parents are accountable for not pulling their kids out for vacations or making sure they go to bed on time and that sort of thing. I mean, it's kind of soft and hard to measure, but it has a tremendous impact on the readiness of kids to go to school and their attendance rate, tardiness, et cetera, and the discipline that they have at home to do homework and other things. And some of it's a lack of having guardians or parents in the house. And some of it are parents and guardians who don't care. And, you know, there are good parents and there are bad parents, but a lot of times we underestimate the impact that has on the macro level. And it's just as important as what we do during the day.
It's so challenging because given the size of our district and the fact that we're growing. Today I had a parent call me and she was advocating for her child. At the end of the conversation, I said, I really applaud what you're doing. You have to be your child's best advocate. She said, I apologize if I came on too strong. I said, you did. You're advocating for your child. Good, God bless you, go for it. Playing that up against a parent that I spoke with last year, when I called because he had excessive absences and the response was, when he's in school, he's your problem. When he's home, he's my problem. I'm not wasting my time with your problems, so you hung up on me. So is that indicative of all our parents? Certainly not, but you know, it's a very big mosaic out there, and you kind of have, what we say to our folks is, second that child gets off the bus, they're ours, and we do everything we can the second they get back on the bus, and we forget about, we forget about what's happening during the time that we can't control. And that's why we're doing things like putting the literacy bus, you know, the mobile media center in a sense, moving out to the community to try and capture parents and kids when they're not on school time, running these after-school programs, etc.
I appreciate the gargantuan effort not only to put this together, but the work that goes on every day to make sure that we can do the best that we can to the resources that we have.
We'll definitely pass it along.
The Tomato teaching staff, by any means, we've had opportunities to continue to charge existing staff against the federal funds. So any burden that we're able to remove or alleviate off the general fund would offer an opportunity now to cover shortfalls and other salary requests.
Just for clarity, we're down 1 principal and we're up 1 assistant principal.
Correct.
Any further questions? Mr.
Well, I guess I'll skip down to G.
I'm sorry, you did ask for C as well.
Yeah, I know,
Just quickly, I do have for C, the transfer request is $70,000 from the supervisor director account to cover the salary adjustments. The salary adjustment line item is $70,000 is the contra account. Now that we're past the mid-year mark, I'd like to balance the contra account at $70,000. The transfer out of the supervisor director is in special education. We have Mr. Manos, who vacated mid-year the position, so we have a mid-year surplus in the account. We have not replaced the position for the remainder of the school year. Therefore, there is room within the budget to cover the shortfall for the current year.
We have something that we're talking about.
To that effect, yes. Mr. Townsend, G?
We'll go to,
Actually, before I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious on E-RIP payments. I know E-RIP payments could be favorable if someone is deceased. What would cause E-RIP payments to need more money in the budget from what was, because I think that's pretty much, I thought that was pretty much established a year or two ago. Why would that account need more money?
Actually, I believe it to be the other way around. If one of the participant members is since passed, then the terms for the year payments that become due immediately due.
So that's all future years.
That is-
It's current years.
That is correct.
Thank you. This is 10 seconds.
Okay, on the, F teaching ESL bilingual 60,000 for constantly. Again, the thing, I look at this and I'm looking at our ESL program and I'm just thinking of things I've heard in the past and I'm just wondering, it seemed to me that we needed all the resources that we budgeted for the ESL because that's one of our difficult areas as far as teaching is concerned.
It is. In conversation with Mr. Gomes, Mr. Gomes has at his disposal this year grant funds covered by legal and ESL. So again, whenever we can shift the burden, even on a temporary basis, onto a grant fund, we will do so such in order to cover shortfalls in general fund salaries.
So basically, we're not robbing Peter
No,
to
we're
pay
not.
Paul, okay? Is basically what I'm getting at.
Right, we're not cutting positions or reducing positions in one area to cover a projected shortfall in other areas.
Okay, and, well, I guess I'll just do G and then I'll stop at that, okay? But again, like I said, if the numbers are large, I think we need to have an explanation of it.
Media specialists, a cumulative value of $93,000. I propose that we transfer the cumulative value of $93,000 from 4 salary accounts: supervisor director, teaching regular, teaching remedial, and in-house suspension advocate. Based on payroll projections for the media specialist, as of June 30th, come June 30th, we'll be short approximately $93,000. You offset here, again, with the ERA funds, as we prepare to state paperwork for ERA funds at each quarter end. We can shift the number of positions from the general fund out to ERA. The projected shortfall again is driven by payroll numbers, and we find that the media specialists were down $93,000.
Okay, in the in-house suspension advocate, is that position still there?
The accounting position is still there, correct?
Any further questions for Mr. Longo? Mrs. James?
For I, what type of crisis intervention are we offering that needed to be covered?
I apologize, but I do not have the knowledge of the actual service presented by the crisis intervention. Joyce?
We have a crisis intervention counselor at Danbury High School, Stan Watkins, and he deals with any incidents that come up at the school that the assistant principals or the principal feels need to be referred to him to resolve disputes between youngsters, proactively preventing problems from occurring at the high school if they come to his attention. So years ago, we had 2 crisis counselors. One served half the school, the other served the other half, and then a number of years ago, we eliminated one of the crisis counselors. And he's also the person that chairs our Stand Together Drug Substance Abuse Coalition.
No, that covers Danbury High School. I knew there was a request for a youngster at one of the elementary schools, and that was not, that never went through. Is there criteria for what services?
Well, in terms of services up against youngsters that are experiencing difficulty at the elementary level, that's where we use our social workers and our school psychologists. The term crisis intervention counselor, that the only person who's labeled that is Stan Watkins at Danbury High School. But again, there are services in place for youngsters at the elementary level through our psychologists and social workers.
And then the other question is for Ann, being that we didn't replace Sue for technical support. I mean, what kind of services are we covering for that transfer?
Tonight for the support analyst, we brought a consulting analyst, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Pasquarella, for the remainder of this school year to support the data team. As we prepare to roll out the new student database, we requested it through Education Connection, a consultant who's working with the district for the remainder of the school year.
So we need additional money, even though we reduced.
That is correct, because we took full credit for the salary savings as from Mrs. Price's retirement. We took full credit against the salary account for the current year.
Are we replacing her?
We did not at this point.
What do we pay?
At this point, she's not in the budget. But if I might, we moved into the new student management system. And in going over there, we had a conversation about how we would do that. And we needed an individual to troubleshoot a lot of the system problems that we were having. We did not have a salary item, so we decided instead of paying someone salary until it gives time to evaluate it, that we would go through Ed Connections, and that's why they're the hire. So if we decide to move ahead, we can. If not, we'll just eliminate the position. We don't have a liability then. So as we move through the budget now, we're going to have to make a determination which ones we're going to keep to support the new system and what we're going to cut back.
Any further questions on action item C? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. We're on to our discussion item for this evening, Danbury High School mid-year grading. Dr. Pasquarella, just to set the stage, at the last meeting, we were given some information from Dr. Pasquarella regarding the events as they took place for midterm grading. There were some questions raised by board members for further clarity. So I will just turn it over to Dr. Pasquarella.
Thank you. In your packet, you have some information from us in terms of the explanation, the background. One of the questions about policy, we do have a policy. The policy has been followed. There was no breach of policy. The question comes in terms of what was done, why it was done, some of the timing issues. There's some issues also discussed and mentioned about validity and what have you. We'll have those conversations. But for the board's edification knowledge, we are under the supervision of the Commissioner of Education. We are also through Mr. Mike Wasta, Dr. Wasta. He's a gentleman who is supervising the district. Danbury High School is on that list of monitoring. So what I did was take the information and send it up to the Commissioner and also send it to Dr. Wasta for their input and to their purview. And from their feedback to me, and as reported to you, they saw no issues with what was done. The state does not get involved in local issues. That was Dr. Coleman did mention that to us. However, because in tangentially we have this TDEC plan, he felt that he would make a comment, and that's the comment he had made in here. Right, wrong, indifferent, I felt it was important for us to send that to them, seeing how they are our supervisors, in essence, over and above the board that sets policy. Bill has met with Dr. Rossi, as indicated by the parent. There has been some things that changed and went back, and I think some clarity might help. We might not all come to an agreement, but there is some background information that would be helpful to you.
Sure. First of all, just, I think the board has this, I referred to it earlier, you probably have a color-coded version, the folks out there. This just demonstrates how disruptive this winter was, has been, and probably will continue to be for some time because we're not through it yet. One of the issues embedded in the conversation that we believe merits additional discussion, because it's philosophical in nature, is this issue that was raised about what's the lowest score we give, is it a 50 or is it a 0? A statement was made, I understand the statement, that I'd like to not go to work to get 50% of my pay. My hunch is there are probably a lot of folks who appreciate that arrangement as well. The difference for us, though, is this is school, this is not work. And when we sat and looked at this very carefully, we also communicated with and had a conversation with the Commissioner of Education, asking him for his statewide perspective. Same thing with Dr. Wasta. Also with the center I mentioned earlier, the Center for Leadership and Learning, which is a national organization in Massachusetts. Dr. Doug Reeves is the head of that. They work in scores of school systems, and they are probably the strongest proponents of the 50 versus a 0 argument in the country. Let me see if it's a little bit convoluted. Let me see if in very easy terms I can unpack this for you, because it's easy to get caught up in the math. Just a couple of quick points. One is we have no entrance criteria other than you have to live here. So what happens is the group of youngsters that we get in, huge discrepancies across the board, just about everything you can think of. Height, weight, eye color, anything you can think of. Academic capability, athletic capability. We take all kids who come through our doors. And our sole criterion for moving those kids forward is to do the right thing for each kid. It's all about the kids on our banner back there. So when we looked at that, what does that mean academically, there are two pieces that are gray areas that are definitely subject to conversation and debate. And we think it's an appropriate debate to have. The first one is this idea of F versus a 0. Let me see in very simple terms. The prelude to this is simple terms, because my math is not going to be 100% right, because it's easier this way. If you look at the thinking behind an A being 100 to a 90, a 10-point spread. So if you get anywhere between 100 and 90, you get an A. Roughly a 90, it's actually 89 to 80, you get a B. So 100 to 90, A, 90 to 80, B, 80 to 70, C, 70 to 60, B, 60 to 50, another 10-point gap is an F. Or it could be 60 to 0. So where you have 10 points, 10 points, 10 points, 10 points, then you have 60 points. And mathematically, let me just give you a little quick example of this. If you have a student who comes in, and we have many kids, as you so well know, who have extreme challenges in their life, and some kids who don't, who are just apathetic and just aren't ready to really apply themselves in the school setting. How many parents have had report cards come home saying, little Johnny, little Elio doesn't apply himself, he's fully capable, he's not doing it yet. If that youngster has 4 test grades, the first is a 0, the second is a 70, so showing pretty good growth from getting nothing and doing nothing to a 70. The third is an 80, and the fourth is an 85. When you average those scores together, you come out with 58, that student gets an F. So in spite of pretty dramatic growth on the part of the youngster, 0 to 70 to 80 to 85, the kid fails for the semester. If you give the kid a 50, with the recognition, did you actually earn this? No, you didn't do anything in the worst case scenario. If we give that youngster a 50, which is our lowest score, and the student gets the same grades, a 50 to a 70 to an 80 to an 85, student gets a 71, which is just about the lowest number you can get to still get a C. When we talk to Dr. Coleman, his conversations around the concept of opportunities for recovery. We make sure that we give kids as many opportunities to recover as possible. Does it play out in the world of work? It absolutely does not. I would not want to come before the board and say, I actually didn't do anything for the past 2 months, but give me a shot at recovery. I don't think it would really. Our job, though, as educators, is to teach the skills of independence. Our kids don't have one to come in. Very few actually, I think, maybe do. The vast majority are independently self-directed learners. So if we're trying to give kids every benefit of the doubt, every chance to be successful, so that when they graduate 12th grade, and they graduate on the 13-year plan, kindergarten through 12, and no staying back, we kind of throw them on the nest and say, we work with you to help you develop the skills of independence. And you had a lot of falls on the way, you stumbled a lot, but through your hard work and the work of the adults who care about you, we've been able to pull you through. Is it a perfect argument? Is it a black and white argument? In my opinion, absolutely not. I think there are still folks on our staff that say, if a kid doesn't do anything, I give the youngster a score that's commensurate with that. 0 work equals 0 credit. And it makes sense. There's clearly an argument for that. At the same time, I think there's a more compelling argument, and one that is really being promoted throughout the country, that says we're really about helping kids to be successful, not about identifying, slapping them, saying you messed up and there's no chance you're going to recover from this. So it's a debate that I think is appropriate, we think it's appropriate to have at the board level. The other piece that it tends to be, in my opinion, very controversial and easily can set people off, and I understand that, and I mean that very respectfully. Statement that I made, let me personalize this for a moment, but it's one that's shared by the vast majority of our colleagues, is that grading is subjective. For the most part, grading is subjective. So what does that mean? If you randomly picked 100 teachers from across the country, or randomly picked one of your teachers that you had as a student, and said, did that teacher ever give you a B? Have you ever earned a B? Virtually 100% of the time people do what Susan did and say, sure. 100% of the educators, when we ask our folks in Danbury, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teachers, you ever give a B? Sure I did. So there's agreement that we as a community give Bs. Yes, we do. Is there an agreement that your B and your B and your B and your B and your B, so on and so forth, is the same? Absolutely not. What do you mean by that? And this is a real example taken not too long ago. Teacher A, I give a B or any grade based on the following criteria. 25% of the grade goes for classroom participation, 25% goes for tests and quizzes, 25% goes for homework, and 25% goes for projects. It's sort of a typical kind of dynamic. Another teacher in Danbury said, absolutely not. 40% is for projects, because it's really about hands-on learning with me. 30% is about tests and quizzes, so that's 70% of the grade is projects and quizzes and tests. 20% for class participation, I only give 10% for homework. So a kid can get a B in your room with one formula and B in your room with another formula. Are those the same? Absolutely not. It's a very subjective grading system. And we do not have a standards-based grading system in Danbury. Many school systems, I venture to guess, most school systems do not. Many school systems are moving in this direction. It causes great controversy among teachers. It takes away teacher rights. It's the autonomy of me to say, what do I value more or less? Parents weigh in on this. I want to put this tests and quizzes on the refrigerator. I want to put a project out, in the living room or something. You've also heard, I know I lived through this, my hunch is that each of us have. I'd rather have Mr. Smith than Mr. Jones, because Mr. Smith is an easier marker. Does that happen? Each and every day in Danbury Public Schools, we have teachers who are easier, teachers who are harder. Is it because of their personality? I don't know, but I can give you one easy example of how this plays out. Mrs. Austin says, you work hard, you study for the test, 10-question test, you get 10 questions, see how you do. Mr. Glass says, same exact thing, 10-question test, and I'm going to give you a bonus question so you can have extra points. And my hunch is we probably all had tests or quizzes where there's been a bonus question, an extra credit question. Not from every teacher, but typically from teachers who say, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. Another option is I'm going to grade on a curve. I'm going to change the grading system for my class while someone else is not going to change and go with that. It's a tremendously subjective area. So when we start looking at what does an F mean, what does an A mean, what does a B mean, that's problematic in and of itself. When we look at how teachers assign grades, more problematic. And when you look at the DHS policy, here's an A is 100 to 90, a B is 89 to 80, so far so good. A C is 79 to 70, a D is 69 to 65. I can't explain why the metric has changed. Roughly 10 points, 10 points, 10 points, and 5 points. And an F goes from 64 all the way down. So it begs the question for responsible adults to look and see what we're doing with our kids and how do we become more objective with our grading procedures. And as was rightly stated by a member of the audience a couple weeks ago, I guess, that we use these grades to determine class rank, see who gets into which college, things like scholarship applications and so on and so forth. There are high stakes, definitely critical issues for us to answer, but the overarching question I think that we have to answer is a moral one, and that is, are we doing the right thing by our kids? So the argument that Dr. Rossi and I have made, and I stand behind it tonight, and I'm proud to stand behind it, is, and it's not one person's decision, clearly, So it's not mine to make, but it clearly is my argument to advocate for the idea that 50 should be the lowest grade that we give. And the rationale behind that is if we talk about it's all about kids, we need to stand behind that and say it's about giving you multiple opportunities, even if you don't deserve them. You just haven't gotten it right yet. And our job as educators is to help you get back on that path and get it right in the future. Last part, segueing back to Pastor Rella, I was not a part of the other conversation about, so what do we do with this mess, this Swiss cheese? Dr. Rossi, the department heads, the central office curriculum administrators, I think a number of the teachers, some students actually were all involved in the conversation, and Sal was part of it as well. So I need to segue back to Sal to talk about the other piece of the conversation about, why we ended up doing what we did in the way from 20% to 10%, 20%, 10% back.
I think two things happened here. I have laid out. There's a letter that went home to parents on the 8th. Prior to 2 days of the storm, I think that might have given the 6th day, there was an announcement that we'd have the finals, and they would be valued at 20%. You may recall at a board meeting, had some students come here and say, let's vacate and get away with it. Let's not give them, they're not valuable because of all the major disruption. They didn't cover the curriculum. But the decision was made at the high school and with the department heads and others that they would give a fund. And that's what it would look like. Then after the 2 days occurred with the snow days, added snow days, there was some real intrepidation about what the exams would cover, how would it cover. Backdropping to some other issue that a lot of us don't realize, there is a management system there when you have 3,300 students at high school to turn in those grades, to get them in, to funnel them in, get them in, verify them, and then get them out because there were youngsters looking at scholarships and other things. That was an issue that was the backdrop. So there was a discussion whether or not they should give exams at all, or perhaps have exams in classrooms and do it different. The other thing that happened, there's a number of items on our TDEC plan that required this new curriculum and reporting back to the state that had coming exams. Prior to this, everybody gave a different exam. In algebra, if you had 20 sections and 20 exams, not only did you have variations within the composite of who valued what components of the grade, you had different exams. So they were coming up with some common exams. They felt that had to be given for them. The decision was to give the grade, or to have the exams, and then to not injure students. There was a long discussion about how you might grade on a curve. And in fact, can we statistically create a curve that would take in all the variables? After a long conversation with the math people there and the science people there and the other folks, it really was very difficult to try to collect all the grades, give the exams, grade them, bring them back, and create a curve for every department and get all of these things done in a timely fashion. There's where the idea came in about, well, we'll use the grade, the final grade of 20%, if it would assist the students. If not, we would simply take the work that they did do the first 2 quarters and average those things together and to issue that grade. With the AP, because it has a whole different curriculum, there was some other decisions about those. There was most of them gave some in-class and some take-home. And then as I talked to a teacher today, just asking them the impact, they actually, just an anecdote here, the way they gave the exams, they gave the take-home, and then what they're going to do is take samples from the take-home, and that's a quiz every week. So they're finding the kids are actually better prepared for the work now, the way they orchestrated this thing. But the decision was made during that time to administer the final, and then value it at 20% if in fact it would not negatively impact the students because of discontinuity of instruction. That was on, I think, a Thursday or Friday. On a Monday, there was a faculty meeting. I don't think there was a real discussion about it. There really wasn't. There was sort of more of an announcement, and this was not an easy thing. There were those that didn't really care for it. There was a conversation about, was it really ethically the right thing to do? So, I mean, this was not done lightly at all. But the decision finally was made to give the exam and to weight it as it was discussed, and that's what they went ahead with. Some communication went home that was different, I believe. Students were brought in and talked with because there were some groups of students that had other issues. So I think there's some of the messages went home differently, and I think that was accurate as the parents reported it. But did I find some unprofessionalism or some unethical activities? No, I did not. Would you all do it the same way? Maybe not. But that faculty decided, or that administration decided with our support to do it the way they did, because it did the least harm to the students in a bad situation. We did also research other school districts, and there were a few systems that did away with the exams and did a whole different system. Not as many as I thought, but there were some that just vacated out and did not issue any exams at all. They went to first quarter, second quarter, averaged the grades, put it forward, and then they were just going to distribute the 20%. Most everybody's on the same grading to the final grade for a year-long course. Did you get some add? You get some work on that? No. Joyce, let me just get Joyce. She was involved in that.
Yeah,
Dr. Rossi involved a number of individuals in terms of making the decision, including me, asked what the impact would have on youngsters with disabilities, with all the missing school, and certainly youngsters with disabilities need continuity of instruction and need the reinforcement perhaps more than many other students, and of course with some of the material not being able to be covered by the classroom teacher, youngsters with disabilities are least able to be able to independently learn. So, he certainly sought my input in terms of making the decision. And as Dr. Pasquarella said, it was a tough decision. When you start with January 7th and you look at the number of days we missed school, the number of late starts, the number of early dismissals, there wasn't a lot of instructional time, nor was there necessarily a lot of time even to team and to talk about these things and to bring students in. I reported back to Dr. Rossi after the 3 youngsters presented here at the board. He immediately brought those students in so that he could have a discussion with them. So it was a tough decision, but a lot of people had input into it, and as both Bill and Sal said, it did not harm any youngster. And you look at our developmental assets, and we're all here for the youngsters, and we do want to be supportive of youngsters. And so one set of midterm grades in an 8-semester high school career certainly is a small piece of what youngsters experience at Danbury High School.
They just ended and had the courses. The kids earn these grades. These are not gifts. The 50 that Bill was talking about was done 2 years ago. That's not a current phenomenon, and something that's done pretty much across the country. That's not, it's not that it's not good. There are districts that did away with grades. They have an anecdotal, they just write up a narrative on students. So there's, the gamut is there. Again, this was not something done in a vacuum, something done with interactive. And again, it wasn't a large faculty conversation. It was a faculty meeting. It was sort of announced that what we're going to do. There was some feedback, some adjustments, and then they went ahead and gave basically what happened.
Any questions? Mrs. Labor.
I'm just going to piggyback on what Joyce and Bill and Sal said. As someone who's going through the certification process to teach in Connecticut, one of the first things that you learn is that grading is subjective, and that latitude is given to teachers in their classroom, and exceptions have to be made sometimes. Students encounter hiccups in life that might affect their academic progress, and it's discretionary. It's between the teacher and the student, and this is the way it's pretty much always been done, and it is different depending upon the teacher. So I'm sorry that so many parents got upset by it, but it is nothing new, and Danbury High School didn't do anything wrong. I actually want to thank everybody at Danbury High School who put in all this time, especially Dr. Rossi.
I'm not a fan of giving something for nothing. And regardless of what grades are subjective, if you look at our kids leaving high school going to a college, they're already taking remedial courses and courses that don't matriculate towards the degree because they're below standards for college. So, and the other part of that, if the students aren't aware that you're supporting them, how are you supporting them? They weren't aware of these changes until after the fact. You have staff that's not supporting the decisions made, and what I hear wasn't as smooth as we're saying that they are. So, they were. So I don't see how this was, a good decision on behalf of the students, because if you give them something nothing, and they're already having trouble with the higher education piece, are we doing them any good? No, because you're telling them, okay, if you don't do anything, I'm gonna give you 50%. And they go to college, they're gonna look for that 50%, and they're gonna have a 0. So saying that it's subjective is okay, I don't agree with that, because the student needs to be educated so they can skip the remedial courses and go straight into their program. I don't see how this helps by saying, okay, after the fact, after they've taken it, well, we decided we're gonna change it from a 0 to a 50. I've never seen that done, and I've been in Danbury, I've been in the school system. If I did nothing, I got nothing. So I don't agree with this. I'm sorry.
Mr. Ferguson?
Okay, I can talk to you about that, how it's been done. But it has been done. When you put an F on a student's grade, when I was teaching, generally when it was recorded by whoever was doing the recording and mathematically, even when I was there, I'm almost out 8 years now. Teachers knew it was going in as a 50 for the reasons given. Do you want them to commit hara-kiri in 1 quarter? Do you want to give the student a chance to get and pass? Believe me, even with a 50, if the student improved, it was no easy matter to go from a 50 to come and get your average up to 67. Okay? You're not talking about something here that is injuring people going to MIT or Harvard, where grade points of fraction are going to decide whether you're admitted or not. Okay, but I want you to, maybe it wasn't understood, but the thing is, teachers knew when I was there that whatever grade I get, if I put down a 40, I knew it was going in as a 50. I knew that's what it was told, okay? So it's been done for some time is what I'm saying, but you may not agree with it.
Right, if you get
Okay,
an F.
but the reason for it, I agree, I was not known as an easy grader, I don't know if you know that, but, or an easy teacher, but the thing is, I felt that it was fair in the sense that we're dealing with young people and we want to give them a chance to improve. The 67, if the person got the grade up to 67 from a 50 and got, managed to pass with a miracle D, probably still need remedial work. Okay, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Okay, so it's a question of philosophy there.
But MIT and Harvard,
No,
they
but I
don't
want you,
need that.
no, but what I want you to realize, it's not something that happened, and I think the majority, when I was there, the majority of the staff felt this was fair. I won't say everybody, a lot of people, some people felt just what they were saying too. Okay, it's never been, people are going to differ on this. The thing I want to ask is, when we reported to the state on these midterm final test results, did we report what the students got on the 20% and all, or did we report it as explained here, that if it didn't help the grade, or the average would be by the first quarter?
I sent all the letters up, the newspaper articles, the criticism, as well as this, so they had the whole
Yeah,
story.
and I get the understanding, they understood it, and it wasn't perfect, but they understood, and they felt that it was what we said, we're trying to make it as least harmful and yet as fair as possible in a situation where, I'll be honest with you, maybe we shouldn't have had them at all. Now, but this is second guessing, this is, Monday night quarterbacking. If I said, looking at it now, maybe we shouldn't have had them, but it doesn't help.
There was a very strong feeling that the exam had to be given at that time. So there was that weight, that conversation. But, you said something that resonates in what you said about, equity and fairness. The real travesty up at that high school was not this grading system. The real travesty up at that high school had been the multiple levels of courses that kids were going through, making assumptions, they were learning content and categories of knowledge that clearly was being taught to them. There were various levels of students learning at various numbers of items, much less in algebra courses, geometry courses, physics courses. Kids weren't even doing quadratic equations, and they were doing algebra. They weren't doing the physics, they were doing watered down. There was real issues, and that is the real, it's not the grades, it's what you're asking kids to do when they come to your classroom. Now, when you take the SATs, you put your name on it, you get 200 points. I mean, it's not an uncommon thing that is done. But when you teach high school and you do the things as Bob's talking about, kids will fall behind if they feel there isn't any way to succeed, and they will drop out. You know, this NCLB was looked at as a dropout specialist. You notice the dropout year went up to 17 in Connecticut, because we were losing a lot more kids. But I think that if you would hold us to a task, it would be, what are you doing to challenge the students? So when they get into, whether it's a community college or MIT or WestCon, are they taking regular courses there? And I will tell you that that the university system is looking at the work that WestCon's doing with Bethel and Danbury for offering less remedial classes to our students that are matriculating in there, because they've taken on now for the last 7 years. So I think there's been a number of things, Rachel, to really be honest and truthful to kids about what they're learning. And if they're not learning, what are you doing about it? And that high school, that redesign was an attempt. That's why Cambridge came in here and said, you've got a dual system here. You've got those kids that are doing extremely well doing the Harvards, and then you got these kids here that are having a watered down experience. Now, all the good intentions, the people there are working hard. I'm not saying they weren't. It was just the expectations that this is what these youngsters could do. We had to change those expectations. This would have never happened this way, the grading system, but the 50 was there whether this happened or not. That's a whole different part of the conversation that's been institutionalized for a long time, right or wrong and indifferent. But as far as this went, the weighting and this was, I think the board needs to know if there was something done here that was illegal, unethical, or against the policy, we'd have to rectify it. I don't see anything to rectify here, myself. And I hope we don't have these kind of days in the future to do this, but, you know, I don't want to go through this again. Nobody does.
This is Molly.
I just want to commend the high school. I think they did the best that they could under the circumstances. My problem is that maybe in this particular instance, there may have been too much communication. I just think that a letter went out, a meeting occurred, you had another tiny meeting with certain students, and they went out with another communique. I just think that that's what happened. The communication piece was handled very, very poorly. Had one letter gone out or one mass communique, then it would have been fine. But under the circumstances, there was just too much communication in this particular instance.
The oddity, if there was one more day of snow days, they're going to cancel the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that was those conversations. If it had one more day, it was that serious,
And there's another piece of the communication.
we would have had to communicate.
Right.
Well, what I would say is the communication, the one criticism I have here is the communication is inconsistent. So because some students came to the board meeting and were spoken to afterwards, which is okay to reach out to people who have a concern, but we need to create a reasonable expectation that everyone knows what's going on. Sometimes it's impossible when you have last minute and snow days come up at the last minute and back and forth, but I think it's important that everyone at least have a reasonable expectation of what it is that's happening. And I think that was what I was most concerned with. I think generally, the policy was included in the packet. You know, we generally leave these things to the superintendent's discretion. We purposely make our policies broad so that the superintendent is in charge of executing the policy and making sure that there's a fairness for everybody. I'm satisfied given the communication with the state. I'm very happy that the superintendent reached out to the state just to get their opinion. to alleviate any concerns that people might have of any impropriety or any inappropriateness. I think the state's response kind of helps that, but I think it's important that you reached out to get an independent observation of what actually took place. And I'm pretty confident with that. As for the 50, if I went to my job and did 50% of the work, I wouldn't get paid 50%, I'd get paid 0 because I would be fired. If I did that in school and I got consistent 50s, or maybe I raised it up to a 65 if I was lucky because I got the 50, I'm still not going to get into most colleges, if any college, because it's just not good enough. And I don't accept that as a parent, whether it's 0, 50, or 60. We need to, obviously we need to have high standards for our children, and giving out a 50, you can go either way on that, but I think that a 50 really doesn't do any favors to anybody. And the only criticism I would have of that is just take the opposite scale where someone's got 100 all year long, and they go into the last exam and they know that it's only 10%. Guess what? I'm just going to stay home and I'll get a 50. So my average goes down to a 92. That's not encouraging the right behavior, but then again, I don't know if there would be too many people who actually would do that. But it's possible. But I think the opposite argument really doesn't hold, because we would be encouraging people to slack off at the end, if that's what they do.
There are schools that, as a final, taking that under consideration, when you have a 40-40-20, that if a student is in that category of where the exam is not going to move that grade above an 8 or 9, they don't take the exam. They're excused with that. It's not, the kid that's intrinsically going to do it is going to do it, is going to sit down and going to take the exam. The idea here was to try to prevent that student from getting so discouraged that, in fact, they're just not going to come to school and they're just going to not perform. And if you sit in the classroom and try to have order in the class where the kid's not participating, it's problematic. So, I guess I see the qualitative side of that. That's helpful.
Yeah. And just the last thing I would say, again, in any large building, you're going to get people who aren't, especially something like this, it could have gone a couple of different ways. Sure, we could have picked really evil alternatives, but you're going to get in a building of 1,000 or several hundred employees, teachers, et cetera, several thousand parents. You're going to get people who don't agree with what you're doing, because that's just the nature of it. It isn't always a black and white area, and there's shades of gray, but we try and do what's best for as many people as possible without being unfair to anybody. And I think the biggest criticism I still have is with the communication. Some people had knowledge, some didn't, and I think that just that doesn't sit well. Other than that, I think I'm comfortable. This is legal.
I was just going to say that, students aren't put into remedial college classes because of Bob gave them a 50 instead of 0. They're put into remedial college classes, having taught them myself, because they lack a basic skill set in that subject, and they need the extra time in the remedial class to catch up to everybody else. They lack a basic skill
But
set.
that's nothing new, I know that part, but giving them 50 for doing nothing doesn't say, hey, stop doing nothing and do something so you can get a grade. Just say, do nothing out here, you'll grade anyway.
Well, I'm not saying that it's a perfect grading system, but it is subjective, and has always been subjective. I would have preferred that they not take the midterm at all, but from what I understand from Dr. Rossi, that couldn't be because we're a district in need of improvement, correct?
Well, they embedded specifically new curricula items and sample questions. That was a part of it. The other part of it, the teachers felt that, we taught this, the kids expected the exam, we're giving the exam. I mean, so it wasn't, as you said, there wasn't 100% agreement on this at all. But that was part of it.
Mrs. Cooper, James?
Yes, my only comment is that no matter what we do, we should make sure that we are there in and for a couple of students to come in here and bring the information that they brought before the board, and then we go out and decide that, we want to change things. Again, I feel like it should not have gotten to that point. So it's to that point. It's over, and right now it's over and done with. And we hope the next decision that we make, including the decision that when something like this is going to happen, that Dr. Rossi will have a discussion with you to make sure that we can at least contact everyone that needs to be contacted when we do something like this. I think it causes an uproar when people do not know what's happening. And again, a part of that is communication, and I'm not gonna say it's all communication. Some of it is other things, and I won't go into that. But my main thing is to make sure that we treat all students fair and be just to them. And that's all that I care about, and that's the only reason that I'm sitting here. Okay? And I know everyone don't have and feel the same way I do, because I've been here long enough to know that.
Any further discussion? No, seeing none, we'll move on.